Hi, my name is Lauren Risk, and I'm here with TealTV today. We're here with special guest Ric Burns, and we're going to talk about his new film, Debt of Honor. Mr. Burns, can I start out by asking you a little bit about what your film is about?
Only if you'll call me Rick.
Rick, okay.
You know, it's an hour-long film about the history of disabled veterans in America. You know, and it's like one of those things where, like, we don't really think about disabled veterans having a history.
Yeah.
But there is a history there, and among the really sort of key things that one finds out about it right at the beginning is that, you know, disabled veterans is a pretty new group of people. You have to have the medical ability to save people, and it used to be, you know, anything more than a scratch and it was curtains. You know, Lord Nelson, you know, famous for having his arm in his sleeve. Usually if you got your arm hit like that, you were gone. Yeah. So it wasn't until the middle of the 19th century, with the dawn of modern medicine, you know, that in our own Civil War we began to save lives in significant numbers, meaning we began to generate this population, disabled veterans. Yeah. And it's a reality that kind of parallels the reality of the Republic, you know, from the earliest days down to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And frankly, we didn't get into it for the history part. We got into it for what's happening now. Because it is a group of people who are, you know, so extraordinary, have sacrificed so much, and who deserve everything from the rest of us, from the huge part of the American people who are never going to go to war. The very least we can do is do everything we can for this group of people who went like, hey, you know, I'm going to lay down my life if necessary, or give an arm or two or a couple legs for my country. You know, we have forgotten, most of us, outside of the military, we've forgotten what that belief in something larger is. Yeah,
that's incredible. So how long have you been interested in this, and what exactly inspired you to create this film?
You know, as a kind of a, you know, historical documentary filmmaker, you know, I've made films first with my brother Ken on the Civil War. You know, the kind of the history of a war and America's involvement with it is something which is kind of close to anything anybody's interest who's interested in American history. But this particular story, you know, came to us by a philanthropist from South Florida, Lois Pope, who a couple years ago came to us and said, you know what, she has been interested, her heart has been fully invested in disabled veterans for decades. And she said, I'd really love it if you'd think about making a film about it. Because we make history films, the thought of kind of looking at this reality, never forgetting what's happening today, but looking at it from the kind of evolving context of American history came forward. And you know, I found it as eye-opening and kind of transformative a project as any that I've had the really good fortune to work on.
No, it is very eye-opening. And you know, that kind of goes into, I was personally wondering how exactly you found people to interview for this documentary. I thought that was really interesting because I know it starts from the Revolutionary War and goes kind of up to present day. So I was wondering how you found people to interview. You
know, as I was saying, you know, the heart and soul is the disabled veterans who we interviewed, but also the, you know, the other interviewees who haven't seen warfare, a neurologist named Charles Marmer who knows more about PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome disorder. You know, there are 633,000 disabled veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan. There are 4 million disabled veterans living today, you know, who left part of themselves on one battlefield or another over the last half century or more. So there are a lot of them around, and they're in all of our communities. And you know, we were fortunate enough to be able to get in touch with, we just selected 4. Max Cleland lost 3 limbs in Vietnam in 1968, head of the VA afterwards under President Carter, senator from Georgia, incredible American. Tammy Duckworth, congresswoman from Illinois, lost both legs in a heartbeat when an RPG hit her chopper in Iraq, and half of her right arm. You know, Tammy, who's like a hugely important member of Congress now with, you know, a baby girl who's 1 year old and running for the Senate next year. You know, J.R. Martinez burned over 34% of his body. Greg Gadsden, you know, lost both legs in Iraq, went on to become commander of Fort Belvoir. And what was really striking about these 4 very different people was how incredibly grounded they are, how, you know, they are so centered in themselves, so understand a sense of priorities and responsibility and value, that the message they have for any American who will take just a heartbeat to listen to them is huge. And you know, our film starts out with the story of how Tammy Duckworth, you know, who, as she puts it, was having a fantastic day in Iraq.
Yeah.
How that day changed her forever. And we very much wanted to somehow scale what that experience is for the 99% of the American people like myself who aren't going to have it. How, you know, in a heartbeat, things change very quickly. They can for any of us, civilian or military. But you're putting yourself at a pretty high risk to have everything change like that when you're in the military on the battlefield. And to understand what that happens, to understand how you struggle with it, to understand how everybody's the same and everybody's a little bit different. There's no one-size-fits-all answer medically, psychologically, you know, so family-wise, economically. And I was such a cliche to say inspired. You know, I just felt, you know, to know Max Cleland, to meet Greg Gadsden, J.R. Martinez, you know, is to have your life changed by just being, you know, these are people who know where true north is. Yeah. And you don't ever have to be in the military to get that. So we wanted to go, right, who are these people? Let's listen to them. Let them tell their own stories, what they've struggled with, what their challenges have been. And you know, the cartoon image I had in my head, you know, of men and women who serve, of men and women who have been disabled, was just that. It's like a little teeny, like kind of balloon that didn't have any meaning to it at all. So to be able to actually spend a little time with them and spend a little time with men and women who, as historians or neurologists, have made this subject their own in a different way. Yeah. Trying to heal people, trying to grapple with the kind of the killer of the present day, which is TBI, traumatic brain injury. Yeah. You know, we now produce disabled veterans more productively, so to speak, than ever before, because we're saving lives more skillfully than ever before. So if the figure from the revolution was 1 in 2 people who were wounded died, it's now 1 in 10, 1 in 9 people who are wounded die. And I mean grievously wounded. So we can put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But then Humpty Dumpty has to come home. And she or he has to figure out how they're going to adapt to a new normal. Yeah. And I think that all we Americans who, you know, are not in the military, we have to do everything we can to try to understand what their new normal is and make it our new normal. Not be shocked by what we see. You know, I guarantee you, if your brother or your sister lost an arm or a leg or 2, that would become your new normal too. So let's make these men and women our brothers and sisters, our sons and daughters, even if we come from a part of the country or by temperament and inclination have no desire to go to war. We have to reignite the desire to embrace those who do, because they're doing something for all of us. And very, very often, in a heartbeat, they're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, this sounds like a lot of really heavy, you know, material and information, but it still sounds like it's a hopeful and uplifting documentary.
You know, I think it is because, you know, these people, we've had the great good fortune, thanks to a generous grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, to take this film around to communities around the country, as we are here in Wilmington today and tonight, where we're going to screen the film in front of a civilian and military audience. What's really striking, it's, you know, a little bit different, a little bit the same each time we screen it, but the men and women who come, you know, they all, the people who have been hurt grievously in warfare, say, you know what, I never knew how able I was until I was challenged this severely. Yeah. You know, that is a message for every one of us. As Tammy Duckworth says in our film, sure, I got baggage. Who doesn't have baggage?
Yeah.
Right, we all have baggage. Well, these are men and women with a particular form of baggage, which they said, I'm willing to carry that if that's what happens to me. And so between how they carried it and their willingness to do so to begin with, you know, you want to stand back and go, whoa, you know, I respect that, I honor that, I love that. And it tells you something about what you might want to choose in your own life, even if you'd never go to war, never put yourself in that kind of harm's way. And that's the hopeful part, that we are so enriched. You know, something Congresswoman Duckworth told us, which didn't make it into the film, and I now regret that it didn't make it into the final film, was she said, listen, you want these people, by which she meant disabled veterans, you want these people in your world. Yeah. These are people who know what sacrifice is, what loyalty is, what 4 o'clock in the morning courage is. They understand how to take responsibility, no matter what, for the choices they've made in life, which is to say they're kind of like adults. They're people who really are grounded. They're not showboating. They don't have an ulterior motive. They know what reality is, and they've embraced it, and it's embraced them in sometimes ways that are very challenging and painful. But to be around them, to get them into our community, and all those, you know, in the 99% of America that doesn't, you know, live on a military base or have family in the armed services, you know, and most of us don't know them. I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and in Fleet Week, some sailors come by, you know. Yeah. That's about it. It's not the way it is here in Wilmington, or the way it is in Tampa, or Newport News, or Oklahoma, or San Antonio, or San Diego. I think the ambition of our film is to make all of America more like Wilmington, where there are bases nearby, you know, a university is tightly knit with a military community, and that kind of engagement and integration is something which we haven't had for a very long time in this country, except in the special places that I've mentioned, and more like them. And we need to have it, because here's the thing. We're going to help the men and women who are disabled, and that's great. But we're going to help ourselves far more, because we've been too disconnected from this kind of service as a country.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to see the film, and thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed talking to you about your film. Everyone stay tuned. Debt of Honor is coming out on PBS on November 10th. And thank you so much, sir. It was really nice to meet you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's been great to talk with you today.